Ring, Facebook. Looks like we're live.
Right.
Did you want to check us out?
I'm checking.
It's always a few seconds behind over there.
Yeah, not quite yet. Let's give it, but it's probably is going to broadcast that. So hi everyone, say that now.
Hello.
Yep, we're live. Okay.
We're live. Okay, we have it. Welcome, everybody. You're on my Facebook page, and I am here today. Oh, I'm Jayne Ann Krentz, by the way. My assistant says I need to tell people who I am
You need no introduction.
when I do one of these. So I am Jayne Ann Krentz, and my guests today are two of the best romantic mystery and romantic thriller writers that I know. Okay. And this is my favorite genre, so I am thrilled to have with me today Rachel Grant. Rachel, author of her latest release is False Evidence. It's part of her Evidence series. And Manda Collins, who is with us today. And she is the author of Portrait of a Nightingale. Can you all see that? Which is a great romantic mystery with a gothic edge, which I love. I love the gothic edge.
When I was reading it, I was thinking this is going to be right up Jane's alley.
So welcome, Manda, and welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
And we're here today. You wonder why I call this meeting. We are together today to discuss the books we love to write, the genre we love to write, and what we think is the appeal and why it works. And I think all three of us have pretty much been doing it since the start of our careers, haven't we?
Yep.
There's always a murder, right?
Yep. Yep.
What's wrong with us? There's nothing wrong with us.
What's right with us? We're the best.
Manda, you started out, or you have actually several series, but the series that I think is so kind of fits in with our discussion today is the Ladies Guide series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is I love those titles: A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem, a Spinster's Guide to Danger and Dukes, Governess's Guide to Passion and Peril. So great titles.
Yeah.
And Rachel, you have a bunch of series out that are all all feature an archaeology background?
Almost all of them. I have a few historians, but then I have a few little outliers, like False Evidence. She's actually a theoretical physicist, and that's basically because she was in the first book in the series, and that's what I said she was, and then I later had regrets. So this book actually doesn't have archaeology in it. But even my other books that where the heroine, like in one of them, she's a CIA Special Activities Division operator, and so she's a spy working undercover in Africa. She's not an archaeologist, but I still managed to work some archaeology in there because I had other characters who were archaeologists. So I usually have something in there, even if it's not a major part of the story.
Let's start with trying to define it, because and I'm talking about defining basically what we know as and call romantic suspense. Those of us who read it and love it, we know it when we see it. But it's a little difficult to explain to outsiders. A lot of people I run into will say anything with a mystery that has a romance on the side is somehow romancy suspense. Others will say anything that's a romance with a little mystery on the side is somehow qualifies, but we know it doesn't. We know that, at least for me, the trick with romantic suspense or romantic thrillers is that every twist in the plot has to affect the relationship, and every twist in the relationship has to affect the plot. So it truly is two genres that have been melded together to make, I think, a unique, unto itself, a sui generis genre.
And if you stripped one element out, the story would fall apart.
Good idea. Manda, how would you define it?
I generally, when I think about it, I think about it as well balanced between the two. And so you want it to be something where the romance doesn't take over everything, but the suspense doesn't take over everything. So it's like, just think about the scales of justice, and they're just perfectly balanced. Like, that's what I think of it as.
Yeah.
And that's those of us that are called to write it, we sort of intuitively recognize that balance. And I think
Yes.
those who don't get it don't end up really writing it. They end up doing something else because
Yes.
it's a hard genre to, well, maybe every genre is a hard genre to come into if you don't intuitively understand the conventions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
Very much
that's,
so.
yeah, kind of what you have to have. If you had to define your core story, and by that I mean the conflicts, the emotional conflicts that you come back to again and again, how would you, what 2 or 3 words would you use? For me, I looking back and I can see that the issue of trust is always embedded in my books. From the very beginning, I've got trust issues going on with the characters, and my characters are always in the process of reinventing themselves. You know, something has happened that's turned their world upside down and they have to reinvent themselves. Do you either of you think in terms of those of core of a, you know, like justice would be one of the core?
I think for me, there's very much as far as the relationship part of it is finding a person you're safe with, which I think plays into my core story, almost always being found family. So, but that's
Yeah.
also trust. You know, like when do you reach that point when you can go all in on trusting someone because you know you're safe with them, and then you know. So I think that's it. But I'm going to think about that one some more and let Manda tackle it.
I think a lot of my core story is about getting past your past. And so my characters generally have, like, there's some kind of issue from their past that they have to tackle in the course of the story. So it's like the past is never it's the past is never past, and it's really, it's right here right now. And also, like, my theory of the relationship in all of my books is that it's two people who come together who are working on a shared project, and 99.9% of the time that shared project is a mystery they have to solve.
Yeah.
And they may have two separate reasons for wanting to do it, but there still is this sense of cooperation between them that is what leads them to forever.
So
It makes them allies.
Yes.
It start as, so it's not like friends to lovers, it's allies to
Yes.
allies
Yes.
to lovers. Well, the reason that works so well, in my opinion, is because when you're allies, there's an implicit acceptance of equal respect.
Yes.
You can trust the other
Yes.
person as an ally. That says a lot about the relationship right there.
Right. Right. And they, without that, it doesn't work.
None of us write stories where the heroine is saved by the hero. They might save each other. There might be moments where one is saved, but it isn't, the entire book isn't just the hero doing all of the saving. And you know, which that I've read books where, you know, the heroine is in jeopardy and she is saved by the hero, and that's and it works. It's not my story. It's not, you know, I want the heroine and the hero and the heroine to be equal partners in saving themselves.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's implicit in the genre of romantic suspense. That partnership thing is,
Yeah.
at least for the books that I find
For
myself.
for the ones that satisfy me as a reader. Yeah.
Yes.
Now let's talk about where the Gothic fits into this, because I have a strong opinion all writers have strong opinions, but I see the Gothic as kind of the foundational um, novel of the kind of suspense that is female centric. It's, certainly men do write Gothic novels, but in my opinion, its core story involves the woman at the heart of the story. And she's caught up in a situation where the threat is inside the house, so to speak. There's always an isolation and a certain element of am I seeing things? Am I going mad? Or who can I trust?
Yes.
And I love the Gothic as the kind of a foundational book. And that's one of the things that comes through on your cover for Portrait of a Nightingale, Manda. So tell us, would you describe
Yes.
it as having Gothic elements?
It does have kind of a Gothic feel in that she's just gotten back from serving with Florence Nightingale in the Crimean, and she learns that while she was gone, her best friend from childhood died, and she gets a letter telling her that her friend left her something in the will, and will she come to the home of the widower. And so, in the sense that she goes there by herself and has to interpret this world around her and what's going on at this house by herself, because I think that's a big part of the Gothic storytelling, is that um she she doesn't really have like I usually have the partnership, and later on she has a partnership with this widower, but when she goes at first, she's on her own and has to figure out all of this stuff on her own. And there's this sense of isolation, which I think is a big part of the Gothic tradition. And so yeah, it's got that element.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it because I love that stuff.
There's also the dead wife,
Well,
who's
yeah,
very much a character.
yes, yeah, that is very Rebecca.
We are very, very
Yeah,
Gothic here.
yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Uh, and I don't think of your books, Rachel, as having Gothic elements.
I don't. I want to write a I don't have the depth of knowledge about Gothics that you do, so I could probably just let the two of you talk about them. But I do. I haven't. I kind of want to write a Gothic someday.
You would be good at it because you're good at description, and the Gothic needs atmosphere. The Gothic that
Definitely.
and that actually is the reason I've never actually written a good Gothic. Because writing description is not my forte. I'm such a dialogue-driven writer.
Yeah.
You need to bring in that weight of the atmosphere, in a Gothic.
Yeah.
It work. But
Yeah.
all that aside, what's the appeal of this kind of mystery? Why do they sell? And the genre's been around, for decades. It's not just like something new, like romantasy or something. It's a classic
Right.
genre.
Yeah, are you talking about Gothics in particular?
This romantic suspense, this
Yeah.
mix, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's feeding different parts of what I want in my escape. I like everybody else. I'm reading for fun. I'm reading to escape, but I get the joy and excitement of falling in love, and the tension and fear of danger. I mean, it feeds all of those all of my id of what I want, and that's one of the reasons why I love writing it, because it's very satisfying to work the problem and spend time with not just the characters in my head, but also the adventure, the mystery, the danger, because I get to go through these really dangerous and horrible experiences without actually having to live through them.
Yeah.
And I know that good will triumph and everyone gets their happily ever after and the bad people will be punished. And
What do you think, Manda? Anything to add?
Yeah, no, my reasons are pretty similar. I like the problem solving element of reading romantic suspense. And like Rachel, like I like both of them almost equally. And I think probably it's because when I was a kid, I was reading Nancy Drew and so that was like I was just as interested and invested in Nancy Drew solving the mystery as I was with her relationship with super stud Ned Nickerson. And so like I just like that blend so much. So when it came time for me to write, like of course I would pick what I like to read the most. So
That's actually a good tip for any aspiring writers out there or writers who are struggling. If you're wondering if you're in the right genre, look at what you like to read, because that's
yeah.
the genre you've probably absorbed the conventions and can do it from intuition. Yeah. Um, what do you, how would you describe your process? I don't mean for a long, I don't, you don't have to go into a long, long tangle on this. We've all talked about process before, but um, do you think of yourself as approaching a story with a certain process in mind? Are there things you're going to, steps you'll know? Will you, okay, for example, do you use a storyboard to keep track of the plot? Things like that. Um, do you have a picture of the house or what, or the character or whatever? I guess what I'm saying is, are you a visual sort of person or are you more um, thoughty? Do you have a sense of your process?
I I um I don't do visual stuff. I mean, like, when I'm writing, if I need so false evidence, she goes to a mountain cabin. And so I had to, I start looking at real estate listings and Zillow to find, like, I needed to find a place that was like, oh, surrounded by 70 acres. And I found a property that was exactly the property that I put in the book. So so that, but I don't storyboard. I don't do that until I'm actually writing. And so for me, my process would either start with the characters if it's part of an existing series and I have to and I have characters that I've queued up for the next story. The other thing I'll do is it's actually setting because I have history and archaeology so much as part of the mystery and suspense plot, as when I can. I need to know the setting because I need to know the history. I need to know the prehistory. I need to know what is because we'll do things like write about artifact smuggling and trafficking or so I need to know what are the issues, what are we dealing with here, what is the problem that's happening in the archaeology world in that space and address it. So that's always my starting point, setting.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. How about you, man? Did you have a sense of how you process?
I generally start out with an outline, which goes against my very nature because I'm a pantser at heart. But after pantsing myself into one too many corners, I finally learned that things go better if I have a semblance of a plan, like an idea of a plan before I start. And so I don't necessarily follow it beat by beat, but I like to have an idea in my head before I get started of who the characters are and what, what drives them and kind of an idea of what the arc of the mystery is going to be, and like just very basic, like, beat, beat, beat. Like these are the three things they're going to do in the first half to try to solve the mystery and stuff like that. But I can't be too detailed on it because then it's not suspenseful enough for me as I'm writing. And I've found that if everything is answered, then I get bored and I feel like I've already written the book. So
I am absolutely in your corner on that one. I need to be excited, and it makes for tension while you write. That's the
Yes.
downside.
Yeah, it does
is-
keep you on the edge. How
oh
am I
my
going to
God,
Yeah.
pull this off? The
what am I
eternal
gonna write? Now what? Yeah, no, but that sense of discovery is, I think, important to hold my attention. So
Yeah.
totally
Well,
agree
that's
with you.
one of the best parts of writing to me is like just this weird thing that your subconscious does while you're writing. And you're like, I didn't know this about this character, but suddenly they're confessing that when they were 11, like they witnessed a shooting or something. It just
Yeah.
happens. And
I
I love that about the process. That's the
sometimes I
best
feel like
part.
my fingers have their own brain because I will type something and then 10 scenes later, when I'm trying to figure out how to wrap up the ending, I realize I seeded the thing when I randomly typed this one little piece of backstory, like just a random piece of backstory, and suddenly it becomes a key, yeah, it's bizarre.
It's
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 so it's
crazy.
so it gives you a real rush when that happens. Let's face it. There's an
Yeah, yeah.
addiction
That
to
is
it.
basically the high. That is the right
Yes.
high.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That and just watching a scene come together when you finally have the beginning, middle,
Yeah.
and ending of a scene. It's like, oh, yes.
Finally, this is it.
Jayne,
Yeah.
do
This
you
is
have
what I was waiting for.
one?
No, the three of us sound like we have a lot in common.
Do you outline, Jayne?
Very much like Manda does in the sense that, and I used to, like you, I never used to. I just winged it. But you do, after a while, realize it helps to have some idea of the story arc. And that really became critical when I decided to do trilogies with individual stories in each story and then that overarching story. That really
Right.
requires a bit of thinking ahead,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
So,
Um,
and you have a third book in a trilogy coming out tomorrow, right?
yes,
do
yes.
you have a copy of that to show?
Of course not. Sitting over there on the shelf.
I want to go on record as saying that when we were setting this up, Jayne told Manda and I to make sure we had our books
Yeah.
next to us to hold up.
There's mine sitting way over there. Yeah, I'm looking around. No, it's definitely gone. Well, the book is Shattering Dawn, if you're listening, and it's the third book. It is the wrap-up book in a trilogy called The Lost Night Files, which is all about
A really fun series.
yeah, yeah, three women who walked into the wrong hotel and lost a night of their lives and woke up
Oh.
with psychic powers. And now they're trying to find out who was running experiments on them. So that's the background story.
So
Um,
now, being the third book in this trilogy, was this one the hardest to write?
yeah, because I had after there's a downsides to series, isn't there? I mean, there is downsides because everybody's looking at the last book and kind of saying, "Oh, well, oh, it's not as good as the last one," or "What about this?" or "What about that?" She didn't solve that. It's a bit more demanding, but but I had stuff that I had to wrap up. Yeah, and but I didn't have it all that thought out. I kind of winged it. So we'll see what the reaction is. Um, you write you write really tangled series in that you've got a cast of characters um, that you have to keep track of. I have never tried to go beyond three books and a very limited cast of characters. So how do you keep up with the cast of characters?
For well, I did just end a series at 12 books because I was like, no more. But although I have a spin-off series, so some people come back, but I get to pick and choose who's coming back, and it's always based on what I need. Like, oh, I conveniently have a former CIA case officer who speaks 7 languages. He's coming back. But no, honestly, I beyond a spreadsheet where I started writing stuff down, it really has always been in my head. I write 2 books a year, and they're long. I mean, they're anywhere from 100 to 120,000 words. Um, which I guess means that I've just spent so much time with them that I kind of know their details. And then as I need to bring a previous character back in, I will skim. I mentioned this actually in our last chat. I will open up the books in Apple Books because they have a really great search app for reading your book in Apple, and I'll search on the character's name and it highlights every instance, and so then I'll just like click through and look for the key details that I might need to know. But if it's something where actually their backstory doesn't matter, then I'm golden.
It's a great idea though, using the search feature.
Yeah.
Have you done connected series, or I know you write series, but there's usually a new couple in every one. Have you
Yeah.
done? Well, do you have a? Are you thinking of a series where you feature the same couple going forward?
I've thought about it. In fact, when Ladies Guide first came out, I did an interview with Murder by the Book in Houston, and John asked me why or whether I had made a decision, what made me want to put different couples in each book. And to me, that was such a weird question because I was coming at it from romance, and like there are very few romance writers who do the same couple in each book. And so then of course I thought, well, dang, why didn't I do that? That would have been cool. But for now, like well, for one thing, I would go insane if I had a 12-book series, Rachel. Because I get like it's harder to write the more people you have in your world that you're writing from, because you have to know all the details about them. And I think I'm pretty famous for having really terrible timelines in my books. So I think if I had to write the same world over and over again, I would fail miserably, and so I haven't tried it yet.
I find myself not wanting to have to reopen the character's relationship.
Yes.
But once it's solved, and what am I going to do with them in the next book? Break up the relationship? Because if I don't do something like that, I won't have any tension left in the
Right.
relationship. Yeah.
And as a reader, I rarely am interested in reading the same couple in multiple books. That's just me. I know that JD Robb does it magnificently.
Yeah.
I know it can be done, but it's never been a thing for me. I did Dangerous Ground and Crash Site are the same couple in both books, and I probably will write a third book in that series at some point, but it would be a secondary character as the hero. But that one, I also divided up the romance arc was not solved at the end of Dangerous Ground, and so I had left a lot of room for the and so basically Darcy Burke, who unfortunately couldn't join us in our chat today, she was someone I was talking to as I was plotting Crash Site. I was like, well, how am I going to write this book? Because I got to close that relationship arc, and it was like trying to figure out how to approach that second book that had the same lead couple. And Darcy said brilliantly to me, she said, this is a second chance romance. This is a new book, a new standalone story, and it's a second chance romance. And it was like, Darcy, you just saved my life, because it gave me the framework for how to approach it. But now what would you do on book 3? All right, we've done second chance, now what? Because again, I wouldn't want to break them up. Like it wouldn't, it just, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read about a couple that's had their happily ever after and then they're struggling.
Well, that's something that mystery writers who have a romance arc will do sometimes, and it makes me so mad because I'm a romance reader, bringing my romance bag with me, to read these mysteries, and then they're like, oops, sorry, they're broken up now. And then you have to like, they want you to keep reading, but then you're like, but I don't want to keep reading if you're gonna break them up.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
I'm the same way, and I think that's the reason I've never been able to pull off a continuing series with featuring the same two sleuths,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I think what you could do is create a like Rachel has done, a little setting of sleuths, you know, basically a little
Right.
core group, and then pick characters from that group. But that sounds like a lot of work too. So I don't know.
Well, when I started, I had no intention of going to 12 books. And that was the one thing, is the framework is incredibly loose. It's not like a trilogy where with an overarching plot at all. There's a few books where like I actually brought back a villain who got away, but I had never planned that. I didn't even, when the villain got away, I figured I'd never see him again. And then suddenly 2 books later, I was like, wait a minute, I can use that guy.
I know who you mean.
Me. But otherwise the books really do stand alone, like with you know, exceptions like that. And but yes, yeah, it would be way too much if I actually was trying to thread it into something, you know, long. I get to just sort of like come up with what's the setting, what's the situation I want for these 2 characters, and then as I'm writing, it'll be like, well, who else can I bring in from the other books, because readers do like that connection, and some of them have very tiny connection. I think that Cold Evidence, it's set in the Pacific Northwest, and all the, you know, at that point most of the books had been set in the Washington DC area, or there were characters who were from DC who were elsewhere, but this is straight up just they're in the Pacific Northwest from beginning to end, from prologue to epilogue. And there's a phone call. Like there's a couple of phone calls with one of the other characters that, you know, but that's it, you know, like, you know, so they're you know, they're influencing the story, but very small. And which makes it a lot easier, because then I'm not juggling, you know. There was one book, Silent Evidence, where I actually on purpose, I was like, I'm gonna have Ian and Cressida, who are the heroes from book 5, and this is now book 8. I'm gonna have them get married, and I'm gonna bring all the couples together to go to the wedding. So 8 couples, that's 16 characters who were on the page together with dialogue. I had to give everyone some dialogue. I was like, shoot me now and never do this again. I think it worked. I think it worked, but it was like, okay, no more weddings for me.
At least somebody couldn't go to the wedding. Come on.
With your Ladies Guide series, how did you set that up, Manda? What was the thinking on that one when you set the series up?
So when I first set it up, I always, when I'm writing proposals, I try to think, I love a high concept. And so I was like trying to figure out what a fun, up-to-date high concept would be. And because I write historical, I always kind of try to think of something that is going on in the present day and that would be interesting to examine in the past. And what I came up with was like this podcast that I was really into, My Favorite Murder. And I thought, well, what if instead of a podcast, what would be a podcast in Victorian England? And I was like, a newspaper column. And so from that, I just kind of took the story of how My Favorite Murder got started, which was they were at a party together and started talking about true crime stuff, and everybody around them just kind of started backing away. And so my 2 main characters of the first and second books are at a dinner party, and there's, you know, it's the Victorian era, so men are being Victorian men, which I don't think they're that different now in a lot of ways, but that's another story. But they start talking about this case that's going on, and so they form a friendship and start writing a column together. And so from that, I just kind of you know, those were the first two heroines, and the first hero was the police detective whose case they tanked because they talked about it in the column. So he was super mad. And so like from then it's just been from this group of women who have formed friendships around this column and the books that they read together and stuff like that. So it's just kind of gone from there.
Yeah, so the group of friends thing works. That's the
Yes.
it's a form of the found family, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and that's
Yes.
basically the connection in my books.
The found family. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's super popular. I mean, people readers love that.
Yeah.
The found, and maybe it's just a universe. I probably is a universal
Yeah.
craving.
Well, I think people like reading or being entertained by stories of interconnected people because it's interesting and it's also gossipy, and
Yeah.
you know, it's we like that.
We're just fascinated with relationships, all kinds of
Yeah.
relationships. That's and the books that don't have any interesting relationships, you could care less about how clever the plot is. It's just not
Yes.
plot is the least, not the main driver. Even
I'm
though we
not interested in a book about one person who lives on a mountain who never interacts with anyone ever.
no,
it it worked for what was the movie with Tom Hanks where he was on the island with
Castaway.
the volleyball? Yes, it worked there, but pretty rare, I think.
and it wouldn't work in a book. It's
Yeah,
probably more of a visual thing that had to. You
yeah,
needed the actor.
yeah,
I think. Well, I think that the relationships is the key, and I think that's what draws everybody to reading, whether they realize it or not, that you know they want. And I think the other thing that draws people to genre fiction is 99.9% of it, and I'm sure almost 100% of it, basically 100% of it of the stuff that works in terms of repeat readings, you know, with people buying the author's next book. I think it has to have that strong moral compass at at the heart of it. We really want that in our care, even if they're screw ups or wastrels who wasted all half their life, you know, carousing around and stuff. We want them to do the right thing in the end. We want them to come through when the chips are down, and that morals compass, I think, is what's really, that's why we go back to genre fiction. I think again and again is to affirm those core values.
And it's also that I'm with you to the end. I'm there for you. I will die for you. I will, and because that is the thing that suspense brings into it, is we do get the jeopardy where the person, they're working together or even apart because they're physically apart, but they're working towards the same goal of saving each other, saving themselves, saving each other. And that willing to, I would sacrifice myself for you, but because, it's a romance with a happy ending, they both get to live. They don't ever actually sacrifice themselves, but they're there to do, it's real. Yeah.
If one croaks, then you have to call it a love story.
Yes.
yes.
Or if I'm thinking of Casablanca, which is a tricky one to analyze because it's in a way its own little perfect movie, you know, its own little perfect storyline. But when you think about it, the sacrifice that they make in terms of their relationship is for the greater good of the world. They're going to, you know, so that justifies it.
Yeah.
It's also one of the reasons I don't do war stories. Ultimately, that's the main character, and somebody has to sacrifice to the winning the war, you know, one way or another. There's just no way around it. So I stay out of war stories. It's personal. But well, Amanda, what's up next for you? You've got Portrait of a Nightingale coming out right now.
Yes, so I have. And in April, I have hold on, these titles are so long, it takes me a minute to remember the whole title. A Wallflower's Guide to Viscounts and Vice. That's coming out April 22nd. And that's going to start a new spin-off series from the Ladies Guide series, which is going to sit around members of the Ladies Guide book club. So it's a book club that they started from being fans of the newspaper column, so that it's a book club. And
I love that.
The elevator pitch is that it's the heroine's best friend's older brother comes back from Paris, and they see a friend of hers get kidnapped off the street in London, and adventure ensues.
Okay. So the Ladies Guide series is spinning off then.
Yes.
Okay. And they are the classic historical lady sleuth, for those of you who have not tried the series, which again, I think is its own.
It's its own animal.
Yeah, the historical lady sleuth, very, very popular right now.
Yeah.
And Rachel, what's up for you?
I am taking a little break from writing actively right now because, as we discussed the last time we did a chat, Jane, I'm moving to Okinawa probably in February. We're still waiting on those final orders, but so I'm taking a little break. I've just been mulling, but the next book that I write is going to be book 4 in my Evidence Under Fire series. So it's gonna fit right here under Han Solo. So yeah, that's going to be next up. I hope to. Well, I should start drafting it actually at the end of the month because I'm going to a writer's retreat, but I probably won't really get into it until March. So
When you're over there, when you're moved, yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation.
Oh, well, let's talk about what's next for you.
Well, if I had a book, the good news is if you're on my page watching this, the book is up there at the top.
There you go. Perfect.
Banner, I'm covered.
It releases tomorrow, Shattering Dawn, right?
Yeah, I'm excited. This was a fun series with using the podcast thing that was my little core thing going on for the 3. And the great thing about the podcast thing is you can do just about anything you want, because it's just, there's so much variety within that tech. I don't know what you call it, that media, that form of media. Yeah. So, well, this has been wonderful. I wish you all a very happy New Year, and all of those of you who are watching, the happiest of New Years. And we will do this again. We're going to do this again sometime. So,
all right. Happy New Year.
Right.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Jane.
My pleasure. This was fun.